thank you for holding this hearing today. Mr. Stratford, thank you, I think, for what was the best analogy that I've heard in a while about football and soccer, and explaining what I think everybody on the panel agrees is the current relationship that exists between China and the United States. But also note that in both soccer and football, we have referees. And while none of you on the panel here, I assume, is an expert in pandemics, one of the things that draws refereeing and the ability to abide by rules has come front and center and is a 500-pound gorilla in the room, and that's the coronavirus. How are you dealing with this? Or is this something that you can't comment on? I'll start and just go down and line and start with you, Mr. Stratford.
So I'm the managing partner in my law firm's Beijing office. I haven't been to China for a month and don't expect to open the office formally again, at least for several more weeks. Delivered laptops to everybody that works in my firm, and they're working remotely. And so we have to wait and see how the situation settles down.
Lee?
Thank you. I think the coronavirus certainly raises issues about the vulnerability of the U.S. supply chain and whether there is unhealthy dependence on single-source supplies for certain items. In particular, I would say pharmaceutical products, where 80% of the pharmaceutical components that are used in U.S. pharmaceutical products come from China. And so I think we should be thinking about disruptions in supply chain, and this should be part of our long-term thinking about the U.S. relationship with China and whether there is too much concentration of purchases in too few sources.
Dr. Reif?
Well, for me, the most important issue is to protect our students and faculties, our personnel, and they travel extensively. So we are just monitoring and advising and helping with travel decisions and avoiding travel to particular areas in the world that are sensitive in this domain.
Dr. Hernstadt?
We've been warning about sole sourcing for years to other countries and the threats to our economic and national security. That said, now is the time to put all of our resources into regaining U.S. leadership and our role in solving this global crisis. We need to restore all of the funding and increase it to all of the U.S. institutions and global institutions that can actually solve it, that can provide treatment and provide a vaccine.
Mr. Default, and hopefully there's a cure in soybeans, but
yeah, I don't know if I'm really well enough versed to really discuss this. Suffice it to say that the slowdown in the Chinese economy is just another issue for us. I mean, they're buying less product.
Mr. Gilbert, I would expect your answer would be about the same too, but
Very much so, Mr. Larson. But the other challenge that we do face is, it was mentioned earlier, is the supply chain and moving things either from out of China into other world markets, but the U.S. commodities, perishable commodities in particular, that are sitting at the docks, the ships that are parked, and no labor to showing up or dock workers to unload those ships has become a real challenge in being moved to other countries, or those cargo ships or containers are sitting there waiting.
thank you. Mr. Hernstadt, hailing from a part of the country that's a thriving aerospace manufacturing ecosystem, does the U.S.-China trade deal advance the interests of United States aerospace workers?
Well, we have yet to see that. As we've mentioned before and as elaborated in my testimony, that first phase of the deal would have been much more effective if it had dealt with subsidies, if it had dealt with the transfer of production and technology in a way that would result in moving work back to the U.S., if it had dealt with human rights, which makes labor costs in China unfairly low and makes it virtually impossible for U.S. workers to compete with, as well as it did something about currency misalignment on that. So we saw it as a big missed opportunity, and we hope it didn't weaken our leverage to come back and get a better deal in phase two.
Couldn't agree with you more, and I yield back.